Hello everyone, my name is Parnali Dharia. I'm a woman international master, and today on Chess Assist we are going to learn about how to attack. We are going to study one game played by Alpha Zero. Alpha Zero is black here, and we learn how he attacks and how he plays for initiative rather than thinking about the material. So here black played Queen e6. Here another move that could have been possible was g5, because since we said we are talking about attack here, so g5 is definitely one of the moves to consider. G5 followed by g4 and attack on his king side. But playing g5 here is slightly premature, because knight b7 and the d6 pawn will be lost. That's the reason why Queen e6 was played. But there was another move, Queen f8, which was very interesting, because for knight b7, now the idea is to play Queen b8. So now if he captures with the knight, then you have this b4 move, and suddenly there is no contact in between the a3 queen and the d6 knight, so the knight on d6 will be lost. If he captures with the queen, then you just capture this knight. So that's the reason Queen f8 was an interesting try. Also here, if the knight goes back to a5, then you can just play Queen b6. And now again, you are threatening to play b4 with the idea of capturing the a5 knight, because the queen will have to move, the bishop will no longer protect the knight on a5, and you will win this piece. So here white has to play b4 himself. That's the only way, because playing knight b3 would mean losing the queen to b4, or at least the piece, because he'll have to take this and he will lose a piece. So knight b3 is not possible, knight c4 is obviously not possible. So the only move that is possible here is b4. And now you can already see the queen on a3 is stuck. The knight on a5 is also not doing much. And in three moves like Queen f8, Queen b8 and Queen b6, you slightly improved the queen and you tied down white's pieces. So now is a good time to play g5, because his pieces can no longer retreat to king side, and his pieces can no longer go to the king side quickly. So it will take him time. He can play knight b3, bishop moves somewhere, knight d2, and it's a long process. So Queen c1 was played with the same idea of retreating the pieces towards the king side. And also maybe he wants to play something like knight c6, and he wants to do something with a4, or at least get the knight out of this a5 square where it's not doing anything. King g7. So here the idea of black is very typical. He wants to play g4 and h3, but for that he needs the rook on g or h file. So it depends on where he wants to take a break. If he wants to play g4, g3, then it makes sense to get the rook to g file, because g into h3 and the g file will be open. If instead white captures h into g4 and later on you want to break with h3, then it makes sense to have the rook on h file. So depending on the situation, he can place his rook on h8 or g8. a4 was played. As I said, white will also try to counterattack, because counterattack is the best defense, and rook h8 was played. A into b5, a into b5. There's nothing much happening on the queen side, and so knight decides to retreat with knight b3, and now g4. So g4 is played because if h into g3, there is one interesting retreat with the queen for black. Can you spot it? How can you improve your position? How can you improve the placement of your queen? How can you get it back to attack? Okay, so here black plays Queen d8. And with Queen d8, his idea is to play something like knight into g4 and then get the queen to g5 with lots of sacrifices coming, like let's just make a vague move or some random move for white here. Just Queen a1 taking control of the a file and getting knight c1 or something like that. then you can just play knight into g4, and again if queen a7 or something, you can play h3 or queen f6 even. So all my pieces are going to attack, all black's pieces are going to attack the king, and all of the white pieces are they are placed well, but they are not helping the king, so they are developed. And this d2 bishop is really bad, but this e2 bishop has some job to do. He's attacking b5. This knight is far away from the place where the action is taking place, but soon he will try to retreat it, but it's going to take some time, and in that time black is going to win the game. So that's the reason why rook h8 or something like king g7 was played. So this was one interesting idea with a move like queen f8. So here black used something called as prophylaxis. He foresaw that white is probably going to play knight b7, and that's the reason he played queen f8. So he saw what white was threatening and then acted upon it. So that is basically prophylaxis. He prevented the threat from white's side. So queen e6 was played in the game with a similar idea, and if knight b7, then here you have this interesting move b4, which is interesting because if he captures, then you can just play something like rook b8, and there's a pin here, so you will lose a piece most probably. And queen e6, white decided to play knight c6 because he thought maybe something like knight b4 and he can get rid of this knight which is controlling the c7 square. So c7 is an important square. It is a pivotal square because it can give entry to the rook on the 7th rank. That's the reason it is very important, and the d5 knight is protecting it, so you should try to destroy that knight. a5 was played in order to prevent knight b4, again prophylaxis, and also to trap this queen somewhere because there's a threat with b4 and a4. So the queen is very vulnerable here, and it feels very uncomfortable for the queen on a3. Bishop into b5 is a possibility here, but you can now play g5 since the bishop has been distracted from the protection of g4 square. So bishop e2 again, and then you can play rook c8, pinning the knight, queen a4 protecting the knight, and then g4. So all the pieces, all white's pieces are tied to this knight, and black can attack as he wants on the white king because there is no defender around it. If for b4 and for b5, for a5, my bad, he plays b4, then a4. So with b4, the idea was to prevent black from playing b4 and to make a square for the queen on c1. So now it can retreat to queen c1 and then queen f1. So hoping to lend some support on the king side. And now a4 was played. Here, I don't think there was anything more that black could do right now. And a4 is the best because you've closed everything here. Even if he captures again, that's what he did, and you can just play g5. So you sack the pawn, you don't care about the material, you just care about the initiative. And that's how Alpha Zero plays. He likes to play with lot of attack and lot of initiative. He doesn't really care about the material. He makes sure that the white king is always under threat, it is always under pressure. There is not one single move where the king feels safe, or where white can save himself, or just random move with black and maybe white can get back his pieces. So that's the reason he makes sure that on every move there's a threat to the white king. So queen c1 was played in order to retreat the queen to f1 and to protect the king. And now g4. So we continue with our attack and the pawn break. So at g4 was played because there was nothing better here, because g into h3 is a threat, and soon king h8 and rook g8 will be played. So something random like bishop f1 if it's played, and you can just take here, and if you take king h8, and now this rook also joins the attack. The queen can come from f5, then f2 is under attack, and a lot of threats. Even the knights might join with knight h5, knight f4, or knight g3. So a lot of possibilities. Another possibility is knight goes to h7, then g5, and these two pawns on the pawn on h3 and the square on f3 are under serious attack. So this could have been a possibility, and so h into g4 was played, queen into g4, and now queen f1. So queen f1 again lending support to the king, and here he also threatens, white also threatens to play bishop e2 and something to do with f3 and then e4. So he'll try to break in the center. So that's the reason bishop e2 is a threat. And now here black plays queen g5, which is a great move. It is a silent move, but it helps black in playing the next few moves. As you can see, the bishop will be going to h3, the pawn will move to h3. There can be some serious threats with knight g4 and even bishop g4, bishop f3. So that's the reason queen g5 was played. Also this knight on d5 is now well protected, so this knight here can move. Rook c1 was played. I don't really understand why rook c1 was played here, but he probably just wanted to have something on the king side. So maybe king h1, queen g1, queen h2, and rook g1. That would have been a great setup, great defending setup. So the king on h1, the queen will move to h2, and the rook on g1. That would form a very solid setup with all the pieces close to the king and all these squares protected. Even black's king is slightly weak if that happens, because it's on the g file. As you can see, if the rook comes to the g file, there can be a lot of attack on this king also. So that's the reason rook c1 was played, I guess. And king h8. So again, prophylaxis. So he understood what white was planning, and also this move has two purposes. So one purpose is to get the king to safety, and the other one is to get the rook to g8. So he vacated the g8 square for the rook. Knight a5 was played with the idea of exchanging the bishop and having some counterplay with this pawn here on b4. So something with the b pawn, but black denies it and he plays bishop g4. So bishop e2 here, and now bishop f3. As I mentioned earlier, after bishop f3, white is again under some serious pressure. The g2 square is weak. This g2 square is weak. The rook comes to g8. Maybe this knight can join, and then h3. So a lot of pressure on the white king. And so he plays king h1. Bishop into f3 was possible, but again after e into f3, you get this e4 square for the knight, and the knight can go to e4. Then he can push h3. So for g3, he can even sacrifice the knight. And also all these pieces are attacked. So that might be his thinking here after bishop into f3, e into f3, and white played king h1. So with king h1, he is making sure there is no pin on this pawn, and he can easily capture here. But black isn't scared. He captures on e2 now, queen into e2, and he plays knight h5. So the plan with knight h5 here is to play h3, and if white plays g3, then you can sacrifice the queen temporarily, maybe with queen g3, or you can just sacrifice the knight with knight g3, and lot of scope for attack. Maybe h3 is not the move that he really wants to play right now. Maybe he can play rook g8, and he can play knight df6. So he'll make sure he has improved all his pieces, and then he can attack. So knight h5 was played to get this knight back and to have some plans with h3. king h2 was played, so that for h3 he can play g3, and this g3 pawn is slightly protected. Even maybe some plans with rook h1 and something to do here on the h file. So rook g8 was played, and with rook g8 again g2 is under attack, and rook g1 is probably a bad move here because I can always play knight f6 and even again h3, so I have a lot of play as black. And again here f4 was played, and alpha 0 plays queen g3. He doesn't capture here, he is not interested in n-passant because that would mean his queen would be active, and again this e4 threat is there, bishop c3, and something to do with black's king. Even black's king is not that safe if the position opens up, so he doesn't want to open the position so soon. He plays queen g3 check, king g1, and now can you guess what black played here? It's a very nice move. You can take a minute or so and you can try to answer what do you think should black play here. Okay, so here queen f3 was played, and queen into f3, e into f3. Again this g2 pawn is an issue that never solves the problem. Even if he had played queen c1, queen f1, g2 is still a weakness and it will continue to be. Even after the queens are exchanged, it's still bad for white. g4 was played, so that if rook into g4, then maybe white can have some hopes of surviving with some counter attack here, or with this b pawn. Maybe he wanted to do something with the b pawn, and this rook can go here, so e4. So that was his idea, but as I mentioned earlier, alpha 0 doesn't care about material. All he wants to do is attack, and all he wants is initiative. So he plays knight g3. So knight g3 has two purposes. The knight goes to e4, and then d2 is attacked. Even f2 is a threat, and also knight e2. So knight e2 is a fork. So that's the threat right now. And so white played king f2 here to prevent knight e2 because there's nothing better he could do. Rook e1 was not working on account of knight e4 and f2. So king f2 was played and knight e4 check was played. King into f3 and then knight into d2. King e2 and knight e4. And here white resigned. But let me ask you a question. What if the king goes to e1? What will you play here? What is black's threat here? It's a very nice threat. Okay, so here black is threatening to play h3, and there is nothing stopping the pawn. So it's a great example of how you should attack, and you shouldn't care about material. All you should care about is initiative, how strong your pieces are, and how you should keep improving your pieces. As you can see, the knight on a5 is still stuck, so the bishop on d2 didn't really move. The rook on c1 is doing nothing. So the whole game white's pieces were unaware. They were just confused to where they should play. Should they play on the king side or should they play on the queen side? So in that case, even though he got the king and even though he got the queen on f1 and the bishop on e2 back, still he couldn't survive because black kept improving his pieces and he kept attacking. There was not one single moment where white could actually breathe, and he was under constant threats. So that's how you should play. So I hope you liked the video. If you did, do share and subscribe to our channel. Click the bell icon and never miss an update from Chess Assist. Thank you guys.